study that was done on the names on resumes, where in this particular study, they sent out hundreds and hundreds of job applications and resumes to particular organizations, where 50% of the people that they gave had kind of like ethnic or black sounding names, and 50% had more white sounding names on the resumes. Those are the only two differences. In terms of credentials, all the other information, experience, it was exactly the same. Within this study, those with black sounding names received 50% fewer callbacks than job seekers with white sounding names. And here is an implicit bias that you can hear about it and that sounds like, oh, that's unfortunate, but it's something that shows exactly how this cycle works. And so the people that were reading these resumes, they clearly held some assumptions about people who had black sounding names, and sometimes people can think that's harmless. But within their practices, they didn't give them callbacks. That's why 50% of those individuals didn't get callbacks, even though they had the exact same resumes as their white counterparts. Now, the result of this was racial disparities in the jobs. Now, if we think about this as a societal level, if those people were actually seeking those jobs, that would have meant 50% of that black population would have been unemployed. Now, when people see that, they would ask themselves, why? Why are these 50% unemployed? And people tend to attach things to the individual when you look at things like that. They'd be like, well, maybe they're not trying very hard, maybe they're not working hard enough, and those things then inform the assumptions again about black workers, and the cycle continues. So while sometimes our assumptions and our biases can be seen as not that harmful, the reasons that we have these issues all stem from the same thing, and it's a cycle. And to stop this, you have to intentionally embed mechanisms to catch those types of things. The Racial Equity Institute by GARE, which is the Government Alliance on Racial Equity, and so it's the government alliance that focuses on this type of equity. They have a metaphor that they like to use. I enjoy metaphors, but apparently so does GARE. They like to use the groundwater metaphor. It says that if all of you had a lake in front of your house, and you looked out your house one day, and there was one fish floating up, dead in the water, you'd probably think like, man, like what happened to that fish? Like, what's going on? What's wrong with it? You can think of the same thing if you saw a student failing within an educational system. You'd think, what's wrong with that student? Did they not study enough? Do they not pay attention? That's a fair question to ask. But what if you come out and in the same lake, there are half the fish that are floating dead in that lake? The question is no longer like, what's wrong with those particular fish? It's what's wrong with this lake? Like, what's going on in this water that half the fish are dying? Same thing that if we were to think about an educational system, if half the students were failing, you'd start to look at like what's going on in this classroom, maybe what's going on in school. Now, if you looked at all the surrounding lakes in your area and half of the fish were dying in every single lake, that's when you would want to look at the groundwater. There's something going on that is systemically impacting these particular fish. And so this metaphor is to help us internalize the reality that we live in a very racially structured society, which causes racial inequity. And this metaphor is based on 3 observations: that racial injustice looks the same across systems, that socioeconomic difference does not explain the racial inequity away, and that inequities are caused by systems regardless of people's culture or their behavior. We often, kind of in the example we were talking about with the bias of thinking who is deserving of certain resources or help, we often look to the individual to say, what is going on with that individual? Why aren't they succeeding? Why aren't they thriving? What this groundwater metaphor is trying to show is that we're seeing the same inequities with race and other marginalized identities across the board. And that's not an individual person problem, that's a system problem. And it's that type of perspective we need to take when we look at these things in order to integrate mechanisms to help. And so I want to shift a little bit from, I know you just sat down, but Stephanie was so nice to talk about some of the internal implications of what happens when there's bias and microaggressions and how that impacts the culture of the board. But I also wanted her to talk about some of the external implications, because at the end of the day, we're here to serve all of Rock County, all of the residents, all of the taxpayers. And so I just wanted her to share some of her experiences on how she feels bias has impacted that.
There we go. All right, I don't have this all written out, but I thought it was important to talk about the other part of what I said before, because I said when we hear people, when we listen in this room, are we giving their testimony the weight that it deserves, or are we dismissing them, or are we not giving? And sometimes are we having a halo effect on certain individuals who might be talking about something they know nothing about, and you're like, oh, well, he's a smart guy, I trust what he's saying, and then we make a decision that is maybe not grounded in facts and reality. So I just thought it was important for us to recognize our biases, and some of our biases are maybe necessary. If you're representing a rural area, of course you're going to want to help the people you represent, but are you still looking at what we do for the county as a whole with an awareness that, yeah, I'm going to favor my rural residents in these decisions, but be aware of that that's where your thinking is. And then the other piece is when and obviously I talked a little bit about how we have to have good working relationships, and we definitely don't want to have microaggressions against staff members. We want to work well with our whole county. When we're in this room making decisions, and I still say we, and I apologize, I'm not part of the we anymore, and I would wish I still could be, but when we're making decisions as leaders and weighing the different facts that are presented to us, how are we looking at the departments in the county? If a department comes to us and it's one department that maybe we feel an affinity toward versus another department that maybe we don't understand as well, or maybe it's a women-led department versus a man-led department, and there are big differences that we have to look at in ourselves and how we receive their information. Or maybe it's a subject in the community like the homelessness issue, and the majority of the people working in our community to help people who are experiencing homelessness happen to be women. And are we listening? Are we respecting that they are experts? They're coming to us with their expert information, or are we maybe not giving it as much weight as we should? And those are the things that we need to ask ourselves. Like, what is my opinion of this expert in the community? Am I giving them my attention? Am I giving them my respect? And so I wanted to talk about that as we're talking about being aware of our own biases and admitting that we all have them. And now you all know mine, that I came in here thinking that it was a boys' club. But for the most part, I do want to say that my experiences have been wonderful, and I appreciate all of the great relationships that I've made. And I hope I'm not wrecking all of them by standing up here talking today, but this is really important stuff. It's a passion of mine, and I wanted to bring that peer-to-peer piece. And Should I go on a little bit with the tools? Then I just wanted to briefly talk about how we create a culture where people feel like they can share and that they will be listened to. And one of the ways that we do that at my work is by having a set of team norms. And these are just, it's like a code of ethics, so it's like behavioral norms that we agree to follow in meetings. And it's things like putting issues on the table, not having those under the table agendas, bringing it all out in the open, which goes right along with the next one, which is no meeting after the meeting. So we want everything to come to light in this board, in this room. And I will say that I've sat in this room and voted on an issue and then walked out and heard all these side conversations and gotten all this information that I really wish had been shared in here. And part of that is just having that as one of your norms, that if you have a piece of information, if you have knowledge, share it. And we need to create a safe environment where that is what happens. Honesty without fear of repercussion. And so that's that idea of calling each other in, that we're going to talk directly to each other without shaming, without making it personal. It's not about your mother. I'm giving you this feedback because I believe that you could be a better leader and I want to help, and I hope you'll do the same for me. Deliver the mail to the right address. Drama is when you involve 3 or more people in something that should be between 2 people. When a fellow board member shared a quote in an invocation that was a misquote, I emailed him privately rather than bringing it up to the whole board. It was not necessary to do so. No defensiveness is a common team norm, and I talked about that before. And be involved, be an active participant. Don't be on your phone, be paying attention to what's going on in the meeting. Be respectful, listen generously, and then sometimes even having a norm that we have fun and that we do celebrations. And I know Chair Bostwick likes to put in a joke here and there and try to lighten things up sometimes. And I have laughed a lot in this room, and I know you all are having fun as well. So I just wanted to share that as one tool that I've seen used very successfully. And when you have them, then instead of making it personal, you can say, hey, just want to remind you of this norm. Just want to remind you, we agreed to this, or let's put this on the table, or let's not be defensive. And we agreed that we wouldn't be. So I'm going to turn it back over to our expert.
Thank you for sharing that. And the final couple of slides are just talking about additional tools that can be taken in order to ensure that we have a culture within this board of supervisors that can communicate effectively with each other, bring up bias, be aware of your own biases, but also call others in. And so one of those tools is just implementing training on implicit bias. So check, good job, all of you on that. Another is normalizing the conversations about automatic prejudices and acknowledging that everyone has them. The third, being mindful of who is at the table and what perspectives are missing. And that kind of goes to my other point of there's no way to make this 100% representative of all of the different identities and people that live in the county, but we can be aware of who's missing, what voice is missing, and how can we incorporate that voice or what's important to that population of people in this room. And so the main goal is really to form the board culture to be successful. Part of that is self-reflection. You can all ask yourself, what implicit bias might be seeping into my work that I'm unaware of? Remember that language matters. I'm I'm glad fun gets had in this room, but sometimes, when we get really informal, certain language can be very othering. So talking about those people or these people, that's just kind of inherently othering. And regardless if bias was backing that up, it appears so because we're all a part of the same county. We're all our people, and so those and these people, that can be othering language. Thinking about the language that you use when talking about marginalized populations. And if you don't know the proper language, you can always ask. You can ask me personally, or ask others who may know. That's another way of creating that culture where people can have open communication. And then I like to talk about things of points of encounter, because we can talk about bias, we can think about bias, we can self-reflect about bias, but sometimes we get caught up when we see bias and we're like, I don't know, I don't know what to say, or I don't know how to say it without offending. And so in terms of points of encounter, I've just offered some statements that you can make that are less of calling people out, but really just trying to get more information, calling them in to understand maybe where their viewpoint is coming from. So if someone says something that maybe seems to have a bias, you can ask them, tell me a little bit more about what you meant by that. That causes them to kind of reflect on their true meaning. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt and say that maybe it was an unconscious bias. But if it was intentional, that'll come out as well. But asking people to tell you more about their comment or their decision, that opens up the dialogue. It allows people to feel safe to talk about these things when they know that we're all on the same team here, and our main goal is to serve all of Rock County to the best of our ability. So, okay, so just to recap, I just want to say bias is inevitable. It's unfortunate, but it is inevitable. We're all living in a society that has biases and has feelings about groups of people. We can't get rid of it. Even people from outside of Wisconsin have biases against the people that live in Wisconsin and don't want to offer them, their business. That happens. But what we can do is be conscious of it, have open dialogue about it, and then address it in the moment when those things come up. Those are those accountability measures that kind of protect the county, especially from those who have lived through times when this county wasn't necessarily about diversity or inclusion. So we're trying to show people we have mechanisms to address those things now. And then the last thing is just thinking about board culture. When Stephanie and I were talking, I loved the group norms kind of thing. It kind of provides a safe space for everyone to ensure that they have a voice and that no one is being talked over. And so just something to think about. What type of board culture do you want to work on? And what type of board culture do you want in the county that you live in that's making decisions for your well-being, your quality of life, your safety, your ability to thrive? So with that, are there questions? But I guess it could have said questions, comments, or concerns, because I'll accept them all. I tried to stay within an hour, and I was successful. So we have about 5-10 minutes for questions. If anyone has any particular questions about any of the biases we talked about, if someone saw a microaggression and was like, what? I say that all the time. What's the problem with that? We can discuss that. But anything that you'd like to address, I'd be happy to answer anything at this time. Don't all jump up and raise your hands at once. No. Well, that's okay. This type of thing is something that sometimes needs time to sink in. I hope this isn't my last time to come have conversations with you, but I will say, if you do have questions after this, I was going to say my door is always open, but I kind of work remotely. So I'll say my email is always open, and my phone is always open to any of you to just talk about these things, whether you do have clarifying questions or a scenario comes up and you don't know how to address it. You can email me directly, or the equity managers, which is myself and Tasha Bell from HSD, have created an equity manager email that you can also email, and that's just equity@the-co-rock. WIUS, just to make it easy. And so if there are no questions, I thank you for your time. I thank you for considering some of the information as it informs your work on this board. Welcome to the new members. And I hope over time I'll have an opportunity to talk with some of you one-on-one just about your goals for the county and ensure that we have a good collaborative relationship. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Next item.
Next item, 11, new business. 11A, supplementary appropriations and budget changes. 11A1, awarding contract for the courthouse roof replacement and amending the facilities management 2022 budget.
Okay, is there a motion and a second? Motion by Brian, second by Fox. Any questions or comments or discussion? Seeing none, this is a roll call, right?
$25 yes? Wait.
Brian left.
Brian left? Okay. So 25 yes, 0 no, 4 absent.
Item passes. Next item, please.
Next item is 11B, contracts. We do not have any contracts under this section tonight. 11C, authorizing letter of intent to purchase 10 2023 truck chassis for the Public Works Department.
Is there a motion? Motion by Mahaney. Is there a second? Second by Creary. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, all in favor. This is not roll call, so all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, that item passes. Next item, please.
Next item, 11D, initial resolution approving revenue bond financing for Tussle LLC.
Is there a motion? Motion by Stevens. Is there a second? Second by, I'll get your name. Winters? All right. Any questions or comments or concerns?
Mr. Chair, if you'd like, Randy can give a little background
Okay, Randy.
on where we've been, and then we'll ask our corporation counsel to provide a little of the technical details
Okay,
as well.
thank you.
So there's some information on your desk that is supplied. One of them is was supposed to be part of the packet, and that's the notice of intent to obtain municipal industrial revenue bond on creation of job impact. And we do have Mitch Olson here from Tussle Wireless that is able to answer a question. But basically, this is a form that is required by the state that indicates that as part of this project, one full-time position would be established within the county that would handle, would be ongoing as part of this project, and then one at their, basically the rest of the statewide office. So we created 2 jobs as a result if, in the event this, this project goes forward. So this is, it was referred to in that amended agenda, the title, as far as job impact, that's what this document is. The second document is following that is a table that just guides you from the original project of the broadband resolution back a couple months ago, in which we indicated that the bonding was going to be $5 million out of a $13 million project. And that basically consists of the tower constructions for the fixed wireless portion. Part of that original table included our $2 million ask to the Public Service Commission, and then the $6 million ARPA. So what has changed and what's included in this initial bonding resolution is instead of having $5 million, it's $8 million. And the reason why we have the $8 million in there is it's the $5 million of the fixed wireless, the towers, and 2 million in the event that the Public Service Commission grant is not awarded. And then per Bug Tussle, adding the financing cost of approximately $1 million. So that brings that total to 8 million for the initial bonding resolution. That's the figure in here. So there's these two documents that are in here for your information. Last meeting, I presented with you some material on, how did we get to this point as far as the ad hoc broadband committee, being presented with various proposals on what the county could do, and then taking a step as far as getting things going and recognizing that we're never going to have a perfect plan. If we wait until we get a perfect plan, everybody else is going to be years ahead of us. Rock County, as compared to other counties, Brown County, other smaller counties, we are behind the 8 ball, so to speak, as far as timing and broadband and getting broadband to the forefront. We're very fortunate, obviously, that we have ARPA money available to get this going, but other counties have been working with broadband for 5, 8, whatever years before this. So we're at the stage right now where the bonding component is a critical piece of the package, and as was mentioned, Rich Greenlee will answer some more specifics on the bonding and the background of that. One other piece I wanted to provide you that's it is related to this project is a cover letter that is going to go out to the town clerks indicating where the county's at in regard to the broadband program, encouraging them again to go to the speed test, encourage residents in their towns to participate in the speed test, because the more data we can lay out, we can show how bad it is as far as people's broadband access and service. And even though, as I mentioned several times, that you may have a contract for getting 100 megabits of speed, in fact, because of the time of the day and other people that are using that same pipeline, you only get maybe 10 megabits of speed, but you think you're paying for the 100. So by that speed test, we're able to measure individual residents and or businesses' data speed. The other part of this information that's going to the town clerks is the project overview and the middle mile fiber and the additional towers, the fixed wireless component. And I've included in here the roughly 15 of the 20 towns in the county, the middle mile fiber, the broadband project is going to impact. And so we've gotten through, thanks to our communications center GIS person, Chris Pale, she was able then to take the countywide map, break it down to the individual towns. So each town is labeled on the upper right-hand corner, and I've tried to be a little fancy here, not just say that it's Fulton Town, but also it's within the town for range 12 designation, and that's what our real property tax and assessing stuff as it labels the tax parcels and so forth. So I got a little too fancy there, but it's labeled by town, and I try to go. The madness is I try to go counterclockwise from the upper right-hand corner of the county, working our way around to from the northeast part of the county over to the northwest part of the county. I think that's what I'm trying to do. So this is information that would be shared with the towns, that would be sent out tomorrow on behalf of the broadband committee, and indicating contact if you have any information to get contact. So just wanted to get that to you so that you're aware that communication would be going out. And we hoped, as I mentioned at the last time, we hope to have our website presence so that we'll have a broadband presence on our county website, and this information would be available so that the residents can then find out to see, how close they are to the middle mile and so forth. And just a comment on the fixed wireless, those towers and or tower sites would significantly increase the cell phone coverage of residents in those areas, because we're going to basically be doubling our capacity of accessing, of providing access to cell phone coverage in the particularly rural county area. So I wanted to bring that attention to your material. I want to just turn it over to Rich, and he can talk about the particulars of the bonding mechanics.
Thanks, Randy. So this is definitely a different kind of bonding situation than we have traditionally engaged in here in Rock County. So many of you, at least if you've been on the board before, had previous dealings with the board sort of in public financing, you're probably familiar with general obligation government debt. That debt has to be basically at the time that you authorize the debt in the bond issuance, you also have to authorize a levy, direct tax levy onto property taxes to pay for the debt on whatever term that it's going to occur on. That is not this. This is a very different type of debt issuance. So this is called an industrial revenue bond. The proceeds that pay into the bond issuance, or the proceeds that the bond holders will receive, are actually the proceeds of the project. So the fixed wireless antenna sites and the operation of an internet service providing network and the renting out of middle mile fiber to other entities that will be constructed as part of the project those revenues would go to pay the bondholders. So the county is not actually the issuing entity in terms of the debt. The bond actually flows directly to Tussle in this case, and they'll be obligated to repay the bond directly. That issuance is going to occur in conjunction with a joint issuance that's going to be coordinated and issued by Fond du Lac County. And so we're allowed under the industrial revenue bonding ordinance or statute to basically pool projects that are the same project with the same constructor of the project in different geographic locations to issue one or a series of bond issuances in order to basically use economies of scale to reduce transaction costs and hopefully drive down the cost of issuing the bond. So Fond du Lac County will issue $230 million of bonding, ideally, and of that, up to $8 million of that bonding will be specifically for projects located in Rock County. So that's what you're approving the initial resolution for tonight, is that $8 million only. What the county then is obligated to would be what's a limited guarantee. So providing a guarantee that in the event that Tussle were in fact to default on that repayment at some point in the future, the county would then be on the hook for taking over that repayment. Tussle is contemplating purchasing bond insurance, and the way that I now understand that product that they're contemplating would be that bond insurance would sit sort of in the middle between the county and the bondholders. And if there was a default, the bondholders would look to that insurance and have that insurance pay them directly, while the county then figured out what I'm going to talk about in a second, and then would pay the insurance company as we were able to pay the insurance company from the security that we'd be given. So we have the bond issuance, right? Proceeds flow to Tussle Wireless. Tussle Wireless is on the hook for repaying those bonds. The county will sign a limited guarantee guaranteeing $8 million of repayment in the event of a default. Also, what will happen is that Tussle will sign a repayment agreement with Rock County, and as a part of that repayment agreement, will also convey a security interest in the fixed wireless antenna sites that are constructed with the bond proceeds. So you'll see in Randy's table here, if you look at the kind of what we call the capital stack in the project, the bonding really is directed towards paying for the fixed wireless sites. So that's towers and antennas. That is sort of the last mile between the consumer and the broadband network. So we would gain a security interest in those, and upon Tussle's default, we could foreclose on that security interest, assume ownership of the assets, and either operate them or sell them in order to generate proceeds, in order to pay the bonds that might come due if we end up holding the bag. So that's how the financing is structured. Again, just as a reminder about sort of process-wise how this works, we have to pass an initial resolution. We'll also have to pass another resolution authorizing the actual issuance of the bonds, and in conjunction with that second resolution, there will also be language in that resolution that will grant the authority to enter into these agreements that I've just talked about. And in between today, if the initial resolution passes and the time that we pass the second resolution, I will be working with bond counsel that we have secured by David Schultz, Attorney David Schultz at Reinhardt Van Buren, to review and negotiate all of those contractual agreements with Bug Tussle and with Fond du Lac County for the intergovernmental agreement. That piece of it hasn't occurred yet. So we're sort of at the beginning phase of the debt issuance process, and there's still quite a few steps to go before we actually issue the debt. But at some point in the future, when we do that, that resolution will have to pass by 3/4 of the members-elect of the county board. So that is a pretty complicated and boring story, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that anyone has at this point.
Supervisor Herman, I think you had a question.
Oh, you're going to me right away?
Yes, yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair. So I wasn't here when this was proposed a couple weeks ago, so I had to do some research on my own. I know there's a lot of different companies out there. Bug Tussle One Wireless is only 8 months old, from what I can understand. The owner of the company, Steve Schneider, has owned 18 companies that have all been dissolved. I have an issue with the company itself. Not so much getting broadband to people, because I know it's important in some things. I do know that approximately, I believe, 80% of Rock County does have broadband or services. So we're helping, I think, or 88, something like that. So we're helping approximately 12%. And you have to be within a certain feet of the broadband, correct, to get it? And so that's even less of our thing. And I think my issue is also, I want to know why we're using ARPA, because that is to help, that was money given to reconstruct or to recover. And I think there is a lot of other help that we can use that money for. That's $6 million. So those are a couple of my questions. I know that's a mouthful, but I'm concerned about, you know, the background of the company itself.
So maybe I can start to respond to some of those questions. First of all, you raise an important issue about the coverage we have right now in the county for broadband, and although I don't have the numbers all in my head, one of the challenges that we face, and this is why Randy has mentioned sort of this our own sort of coverage survey that we're trying to do, is that the data that is out there on coverage across the country is notoriously bad. In trying to actually represent actual coverage. So, for example, one of the ways in which coverage is measured is if there's like one residence within a census block that has broadband coverage, they count that for the entire census block. And so it will look like there's more coverage than there really is. And so in that way, it's hard to really know the answer to the question about how much coverage exists out there. And that's why, again, we're trying to measure that for ourselves so that we can actually go to the PSC or others and say, yes, the federal numbers that we have right now look like it's 80% potentially, but really it's 30%, for example, or whatever that number would be. I have no idea. I just made that up. But so you're right. The numbers look like one thing, and in reality, they're probably another. We just don't really know what the other is right now, other than anecdotally. So that's the coverage question. The ARPA question is a legitimate question, and that is really a great policy question for this board to decide. ARPA, there is a sort of in the COVID response buckets of the ARPA funding is one specifically related to broadband, with the intent that during the pandemic, when everybody had to go home, whether it was for school or business, or they had a lack of ability to see their doctors because they couldn't go into the clinic, that the lack of broadband or high-speed internet really kept people from being able to function in society. And so therefore, that's why broadband was included in ARPA. as a response to COVID to expand coverage there. Whether or not that is a priority of this board is the question for you all, right? And so I think that's a legitimate question to ask: is this the highest and best use of the ARPA dollars for a broadband expansion project? And as far as Bug Tussle goes, this might be a good opportunity to invite Mitch up to the front here. Mitch Olson is with Bug Tussle Wireless. He's been our contact with Bug Tussle. And so, Mitch, if you just want to give a little bit background about Bug Tussle and the company, and Bug Tussle's been around, and maybe a little bit, Mitch, about sort of how transformation of the company from where you started to what you're doing today.
Yep, absolutely. Bug Tussle was formed as a company in 2003, primarily by our founder, Sneef Steiner, and his farm in Manitowoc County that he couldn't get internet access to. So he strung together a series of microwave dishes across silos to the point where he could have coverage. As he developed that, his neighbors got jealous and wanted him to do the same, so he eventually pieced together kind of this very bare bones fixed wireless network to bring broadband coverage to rural Wisconsin. That eventually grew over time, and as you start building towers, you realize that there's a lot of value in building towers when you develop relationships with cellular carriers. Steve had a history working for Cellcom and kind of leveraged what he knew in the industry there to combine that to the relationship we have today, primarily most with AT&T, but with the other carriers as well. And we've continued to kind of grow and snowball through the process there. The assets that we install, whether that's the towers or whether that's the fiber, are very multiple in their purpose and their application, which is why a program like this is viable, even in very sparsely populated areas of the county, because we're using the cell towers for fixed wireless broadband and for cellular, and we're using the fiber optics for transport between the towers and fiber to the home. All of these kind of revenue streams come together and make it really make sense as a program. To just address your one point directly, Bug Tussle 1 LLC is the special purpose entity that was formulated just for this bond issuance program to keep kind of everything compartmentalized from a revenue standpoint. So that's why that entity is only 8 months old.
And I think that the other question that you asked that I forgot to address earlier, and Mitch certainly can address this as well, but you're correct in sort of the identifying that if this project were to go forward, that this project, wouldn't sort of answer all the questions, right? So when we talk about middle mile, Mitch, maybe you can address what middle mile is, and the idea that the circuit and the maps that Randy presented is intended to, again, as Mitch will maybe describe middle mile, and that folks who are within a certain distance, as you indicated, Supervisor Herman, might be able to connect to that middle mile if they're close enough. But ultimately, the intent then is to spur what's called last mile connections from other third parties that will over time expand. And so creating this infrastructure creates a circumstance in which others might be interested in coming in to the county providing service as well. So maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, in that it's a meeting for metaphors. The construction of a fiber optic network is very similar to the highway system. In a traditional sense, as you have your interstates, you have your middle mile, and generally speaking, you don't like to have people who live on the interstates. We install our middle mile a little bit differently because we're installing a last mile cable simultaneously on top of that middle mile piece. So we're making those connections, which is just based on our small town roots, because it's really a pain to have someone dig up your yard if your service doesn't get any better. So we make those connections right away. But as Josh was saying, is the real kind of girth of this project is that this is step one from which the network is going to grow outward. Is you need to have your middle mile piece in place. You need to have a network design that makes sense, that's sustainable on its own. And as you continue to reinvest in the projects through additional grant funding, through the revenue of the project, making additional last mile connections to the point where everybody's connected with fiber, because that's where this all is going to end. So if you look at whatever broadband data you want to see at this point and take whatever percentage of the county that currently has service, the definition of broadband is going to increase over time. A lot of the people in rural Rock County are currently served by DSL, which is incapable of the speeds that people need today, let alone the speeds that people are going to need in the future. So all of that is going to have to be replaced with fiber. This is our first step at kind of making those replacements, and so that the connections can keep up with people's needs.
Supervisor Cullins.
I have a question in one of the things I read. I want to make sure I understand this correctly. Affecting approximately 20,301 individuals, or 12% of the county's total population, are partially underserved. unserved or not serviced per the 2020 broadband application to the state to serve Rock County supplied by Tussle Wireless. Did you guys come up with those numbers? Is that the way I understand that?
Yes, we did. So the combination of those numbers kind of varies, and we just wanted to put together a good number that we had some foundation for. So effectively, it's looking through the numbers, taking out the Janesville and the Beloit piece of it, looking where areas are exclusively served by DSL, and acknowledging that in reality, their service is probably not very good.
So you're guessing.
It's an estimate. We didn't knock on doors and determine everyone's level of connectivity.
Supervisor Collins, just a comment. So when we're encouraging people to do the speed test, the data that we're showing right now is roughly 800 to 900 people that have done the speed test. Roughly 15% meets the minimum criteria for broadband access. The rest of the 85% are showing that they don't have broadband access, and that's the current data that we're collecting now. We're encouraging more people, residents, businesses, to do the speed test so we can have more data like that. So here again, as Josh Smith mentioned, the federal designation for this, if there's one business or residence within a census district that has broadband capability speed, they automatically cover, say that the rest of the census district has, a census tract has it. And what we're trying to do with the speed test is show that people do not have the broadband capability at their home or in the business reality throughout the county.
Would it be more accurate to do households instead of individuals?
Those are, yeah, the speed test is per household, so, yeah. But
So you could take this number lower because you have 20,301 individuals. That could be less households.
correct. I think it's.
Do we have a number on the number of households?
I thought it was like 12. So that's from the resolution originally established. A figure that I'd come out was like 12,000 households. And I need to check that, but I thought I saw a figure as related to the rural county outside the cities of Beloit and Janesville that were roughly talking about 12,000 households. But
Do
I
we,
need to check that.
percentage-wise of the total county households, we don't know it, nobody's run that figure yet?
That's a really tough evaluation metric for Rock County in particular, given how densely populated Janesville and Beloit are compared to the rest of it. Is if you wanted to just serve a high percentage of the people, all you would have to do is make sure that Janesville has really robust service.
Fair enough. One other question, do we have any idea if we're gonna have 100% coverage when this is all said and done?
When this is all said and done, on a long enough timeline, eventually you'll have 100% coverage in the same way everyone has electrical service at their house. When this project is done, no, it will not be a complete answer. There'll be additional investments made in the network, additional phases of the fiber project. This is just kind of pushing the ball forward.
Thank you.
Supervisor Towns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also have a couple questions. I do want to say that I'm excited about this project. I have wanted rural broadband in Rock County for high speed for a long time, and I'm glad that the county is working on it. And I certainly think it's an appropriate way to use ARPA funds. I don't have a problem with that. I do have 3 questions, though, that bother me about the proposal. Industrial revenue bonds, the payback depends on the profitability of Tussle over the next 30 years, if I'm understanding the term of the contract. And that's good, and I would anticipate that it'll all work out just the way we think it will. However, if it does not, I'm a little cautious about how we protect the taxpayers of Rock County if Rock County ends up being on the hook for this. And the talk about bond insurance is somewhat comforting, although it's not in place and it's not part of this. It sounds like it's just now coming up as part of the discussion, and that it might be not so much to protect, what's been talked about is not so much to protect Rock County, but more to make the bonds more attractive to investors. And so that concerns me greatly, that there's really no insurance for Rock County if Tussle cannot either defaults or fails to perform. And so that bothers me. I, um, I do have a question about the 30-year term, and we've talked about that. And I think it's unusual for a local government to issue, to take out debt for 30 years. And I don't know, do we have any other debt that we've ever issued for that length of time?
Josh, I don't know.
Yeah, so you're correct. Under normal general obligation bonding that we're allowed to do, which is all we've really ever done, statutes limit that to 20 years. And so that's the maximum that we have ever been able to do. And, you know, even until recently, we've typically, you know, for highway projects, it's 10 years. Rock Haven is 15. For the Dr. Williams Center, 20. And for the jail project, we talked about 20 as well. But, right, there'd be no other circumstance in which, you know, the county has borrowed for a 30-year term.
It just makes me feel like, kind of like, it would be like us still paying on a telephone system that was installed in 1990. You know what I'm saying? That seems unusual to me, and I wish the term wasn't that long. My last question has to do with the changing from 5 million to 8 million. And I do understand why that it's up to 8 million. If we end up drawing the entire 8 million, does Bug Tussle pay back the 8 million, or are they only paying back the 5 million?
They would pay the entire 8 million. So all of the debt issuance would be obligated by Bug Tussle.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Josh or Randy, did you want to answer the other questions that Supervisor Townsend? I think she had a couple before that.
I just want to make a comment on the length of 30-year. I think we need to look at broadband as a utility. And when Alliant comes to the local units of government for their franchise agreement, they're not looking at 10 or 15 years. They're looking at 50 years or 75 years with that local unit to get a long-term franchise as a utility, because that's the investment you need from a long-term standpoint to put stuff on the ground. And broadband really needs to be put in that kind of perspective. It is a utility. And so therefore, having a long-range, 30-year payback is not out of the realm as it relates when compared to an Alliant type of utility type of project, because some local units of government, I worked in Michigan before I came to Wisconsin, they have 100-year franchise agreements with the utility companies, because the utility companies wanted to make sure that that was the investment that they were going to be able to provide that service in that area. So
And
I
maybe
think broadband is a similar type of thing.
And maybe this would be a good opportunity for Mitch to, as sort of the expert, address sort of the technology pieces and age. And
Sure. The one thing I'll address on the timeline is your two questions are intricately related, because the financial viability of the project and the duration of time that we have to pay the money back are very much connected. So if we stretch it out over a long enough period of time, any project you can do is viable, which isn't necessarily our motivating factor here, but it's certainly a part of it, is our payments are much more reasonable on a 30-year timeline than they would be on a 15 or a 20. Now, from the technology side of it, and that you mentioned paying on a phone system from 1990, the core assets that we're installing here are the physical tower structure and the fiber optic cabling itself. In both senses, there's electronical equipment that is adhered to it to actually provide the service, and that equipment does not have a 30 or 50-year lifespan, but the towers or the fiber optic does. Sticking with metaphors, in the same way that if you're working on your house and you want to replace your light fixture, you don't have to replace the wires, you don't have to pull everything down, you just take the light fixture off and put a new one on. That's the same way that the fiber optics operate. So as speed progresses, as technology advances, the specific glass in the fiber optic cable is still good. There's still fiber in the ground from the 80s that's still in utilization. The only thing they do now that's different is they bury more of it because you're using it for more purposes. A lot of the old fibers are 1 or 2 strands, and we're burying 144.
Okay, Supervisor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I recently sat in a new supervisor orientation where our finance director illustrated that the county has been extremely fiscally responsible. We're in pretty good shape financially, and this allows us the ability to serve the community in ways that they really need us to do so. Broadband has been an issue for quite some time in this county. Rock County has historically been behind as it relates to technology. And this project is about investing in infrastructure. So I want us all to keep that in mind, because several of us were sitting in the same orientation where our finance director let us know that we have been extremely fiscally responsible and we're in pretty good shape. So can someone speak to, because there was a question that came up about there being quite a few other companies available that can do this. And I trust that the broadband ad hoc community did your due diligence in choosing this company, but can someone kind of speak to the process that was used to choose this company, please? Thank you.
The ad hoc broadband committee early on last year recognized that we did not have the expertise and to start looking at it. So with suggestion out of James Otterstein, our economic development program manager, suggested a outside consultant for technical assistance to help the broadband committee. So Nokomis Networking, we contracted with Nokomis Networking early last year, to provide the broadband committee with some technical expertise. So Russ Berg, who has been attending the meetings and so forth, has been able to, and his work is up north for many years. Prior to being a consultant on a broadband area, he was involved in a particular cell phone, fixed wireless broadband company, and then began his own consulting firm. And he is contracted with several other counties besides us. So he looked around the scenario and they identified there are third-party providers in Rock County. There's one on the Broadhead area, Orfordville area, that started out providing cell phone and now providing fiber service to communities in that area. There's a provider in the east end along the north-south Walworth County area that is coming into Rock County. So various smaller broadband internet service providers are currently in the community. What Russ Berg stated is that we need a strategy, and part of the principles resolution that was passed is having a strategy of how we want to start broadband, and recognizing that we're not going to have a perfect plan, but having the middle mile established in the ground first is the impetus to again get these small providers who are already out there to connect to that middle mile. So that's the kind of the strategy. And with Russ Berg's expertise, we had several presentations from several internet service providers, including the big players, the charter that has been designated what's called the RDOF by the federal government, which gets there's a lot of acronyms out there, but so we had several presentations, and the committee decided that Bug Tussle was the best way to go. And I guess if James want to come up, and if you want to say anything, James.
Thank you. Just to add a little more context to the overall discussion, which is extremely important because this is a very important investment-related question and a policy-related question. One of the biggest charges of the ad hoc committee was to kind of figure out what was going to be the best play, given the resources that we had, given the time that we had, and given the opportunities to partner with the other providers out there. And Randy referenced a number of internet service providers that either have a foot in the county or certainly are investigating that. Round numbers, we've been told estimate-wise, $200 million to provide broadband throughout the county to every home. Fiber to the home is the future-proof, right? I'm using government terminology. That is kind of the top, the gold standard, the best in class. $200 million is the current estimate on that. And so certainly to achieve that takes a tremendous amount of money. And it's evident that a number of providers aren't necessarily doing that on their own, and they're not going to do it on their own without some sort of catalyst or impetus or partnership associated with it. So thankfully, we've been presented with an opportunity to investigate, to evaluate, and prioritize where those opportunities may reside or exist, and what we have, what came out of that ad hoc committee is kind of the recommendations in a couple different scenarios, right? If the PSC grant comes forward, if ARPA funding is going to be used, here's scenario one. If that's not available, scenario two is this particular track. So at this point, I know that Supervisor Wilson had his hand up, so if it's okay, certainly you served on the ad hoc broadband committee, and as a point of order, if you want to go ahead and direct any question over there, I think I'm done with my quick remarks, but you folks that served on the committee certainly sat in and asked a lot of pointed questions, and between staff as well as our consultant that we had on, I think we did a pretty comprehensive job of providing answers to those questions, so.
And before we jump to Supervisor Wilson, I have Supervisor Farrell and Supervisor Woodman that I need to get first. So we can go in that order, and then Supervisor Wilson could come after Supervisor Woodman. So Supervisor Farrell, and then we'll get to, after Wilson, we'll go to Supervisor Cullen again.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to make sure I understand this, but I know there's a lot of funds out there. Governor Evers just increased the amount available for broadband. Have we applied for these grants? Have I misunderstood this? And if so, what's the prospects of receiving any of these funds from the PSC?
So we did submit an application in partnership with Rock County utilizing the bond concept as the match. That's the $2 million float figure that's kind of working on Randy's table. To be honest, I don't have a particularly optimistic outlook of that grant being successful, given the maps that the PSC is making that determination on. As of the update in the maps, is Rock County's broadband coverage improved drastically in the eyes of the PSC, so they think it's a little bit problem solved. The data that they've collected shows that that's not the case, but that's where they're hanging their hat.
Okay, another question I have is concerning due diligence. Some counties, correct me if I'm wrong, have they been able to, have your financial statements been open for audited financial statements been open for them to analyze, to see the viability and the stability of your company?
Yes, sir, they have. Our financial for 2021 has not yet been completed, but the previous years are available for review.
Has Rock County, I've been told, I don't think Rock County has done that. Am I correct?
Right, so I can answer that. Right, so we have not, as was this issue came up in the Finance Committee as well, so we have not contracted with an accounting firm, for example, to evaluate the financial statements of Bug Tussle to determine the question Supervisor Farrell raises about long-term viability or any of those things. We've relied really on the fact that other counties have had an opportunity in advance of us, those who have already engaged in similar projects with Bug Tussle and Fond du Lac to do their due diligence. And so we've not invested those funds. But certainly, as I noted in finance, if it's the will of the board that we do that to answer the questions, we certainly can explore that.
Okay, the final question I have is, I'm not sure I understand, what are the bond issuance costs involved, and how's that being handled, and how's that being parceled out to the various counties, if it is?
Everything in the context of the bonds is evaluated on your pro rata basis, based on the amount that you're guaranteeing in your resolution, or that you're agreeing to in your resolution. The costs, the roughly $1 million of costs, is a combination of three things: the issuance costs themselves, attorney's fees and financial consultant fees, and issuance costs for underwriters and things; the initial funding of the debt service reserve fund, which is a mechanic for these bonds, wherein the bond trustee holds a year's worth of payments in an account and then disperses those, and the actual replenishment of the debt service reserve fund is both Hilbert or the county's obligation should it come to that. So we're financing the issuance costs, a year's worth of payments in the debt service reserve fund, as well as the capitalized interest for the construction period, in that the assets won't be in the ground and won't be generating revenue. There won't be any money coming in for a 3-year period at the beginning of the bonds. So that capitalized interest is part of that issuance cost number.
And that million, you said it's $1 million, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So that's only for Rock County, $1 million?
Yes, sir.
So the total of all of these counties is, how many millions of dollars would that be then? We're participating 8 million of this, and it's 1 million for us. So how much is it in total for the total project?
The specific answer for the set of 5 counties that we expect to go in this first set this summer, I don't have for you. Last year, in December, we issued bonds for 5 counties, Marathon, Fond du Lac, Waushara, Calumet, and Jackson. In total, $70 million, and of that, I believe 12 was debt service reserve fund, capitalized interest, and issuance costs.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Woodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I have some concerns in talking with 3 of my 4 townships. Yes, we all need broadband, and I've learned that one provider is discontinuing their service to one of our customers, or one of our townships. And I guess their response was pretty cool because they've heard this so many times that they're really not that excited about it. But also there was concern about towers and all the things that go into this. And maybe Supervisor Snyder can help me a little bit on Turtle. They haven't returned my call yet, but I was told that they really didn't want to put up any more towers, which I also know that the people out there in the townships really want broadband and higher speeds and better service. And so it makes this a very difficult decision. But I'm wondering, as far as the lines go, why the lines are so far to the east on the map here. So we're coming down basically along the Walworth County line there.
Yep, the fiber route design was made in a combination of factors. We evaluate population groups, we evaluate tower locations for backup purposes. We had conversations with representatives from Rock County to figure out something that makes sense. The combination of that and identifying areas that the PSC thinks are underserved, so we can connect as many of those as possible to give our grants a possible leg up. At the end of the day, is this project, in the event the PSC grant isn't awarded, is just a pot of money. And so if the county has additional input and would like to move some of those lines, we have no obligations to anyone else. It's just a bond project and just a bunch of money that we can deploy into assets that you and I agree are important for Rock County. So if people in those townships would prefer that a tower not be located there, not an issue. We have a site lease for Turtle, but we can walk away, not a big deal. And if we want to move the fiber route to hit different areas or to focus on different county objectives or town objectives, making sure we're passing town halls, whether that's a road over from where the line is currently drawn, all those things are pliable unless the PSC is involved.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor, my conversation with Roger Ankleim, the town board chair for Town of Turtle, indicated that he felt that there was already enough towers there in the town. He would prefer that, if possible, that Bug Tussle utilize an existing tower to locate their equipment as opposed to building a separate standalone town. So we would be investigating that.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Wilson.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point that there's a real county interest in having this done. I'd like to make an analogy. Many, many years ago, in the state of Texas, there was a grand investment in what were called farm-to-market roads. And we've made the highway kind of analogy, and it was, at the beginning of the internet, we always talked about the information superhighway and things like that. The road analogy is a good one. The farm-to-market roads opened up markets to rural farmers in Texas. And it was a tremendous economic boom to have that capability of making that connection to markets. We've got a similar situation right now. Randy answered the question in regard to the broadband committee of did we hear from some of the other providers. Charter made a presentation to us, and we can be pretty I can be pretty certain in suggesting to you that Charter really isn't interested in serving certain parts of the county. Charter is interested in those areas that are going to have the fastest rate of return. That's why we've got decent broadband connections in Janesville and decent connections in most of Beloit. Bug Tussle is a company that has worked in the rural market. They have a desire to do this, but they can't do it on their own. What we're doing is we're putting the county investment into this because we have a county interest, and we've got a partner that has proven itself to be capable of doing really a hybrid, because the hybrid situation is what's going to get the greatest service really in the shortest period of time.
Supervisor Cullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize for not recognizing you last time, so I'll thank you again, Mr. Chair. That's twice.
No problem.
I'd also like to extend a thank you to the ad hoc committee. I know this is a very trying, challenging thing to face, but thanks for your time and commitment to it. If we were to vote on this tonight, there's no insurance policy that if Bug Tussle defaults, we're holding the bag, correct?
That's correct. I mean, I would say there's no anything at this point in time. So there's a number of contracts that are going to have to be drafted, negotiated, and agreed to. There's a limited guarantee that the county is going to have to make to Bug Tussle and the bonding issuance. There's an IGA with Fond du Lac. There is a security agreement that will transfer security interest in the hard assets that Bug Tussle will be developing. And there is potentially, some kind of bond insurance product that we may explore in terms of mitigating or transferring the county's risk in some way. None of those have been finalized. None of those have been drafted. That will all have to happen before this board can authorize the final issuance. So all of those things will be negotiated, and finalized, and then we'll bring the final resolution back to the board for authority to actually do the issuance at that point in time.
Okay. And then, as I understand it, nobody from the county has actually seen financials or talked to anybody that's seen financials on Bug Tussle.
All right, so we have not reviewed the financials ourselves in the way that we would want, in the same way that we have secured bond counsel, because as learned as our corporation counsel is, it's a very specialized area of expertise. So in the same way that we got bond counsel, if we were going to actually want to evaluate the financial statements in the way that Supervisor Farrell described earlier, we would want to hire an accounting firm to do that. And so we have not done that, but we have been in conversations with our counterparts and our colleagues in a way that they have done similar types of due diligence and are comfortable with it. And so again, we've kind of relied on that to not both prolong or to invest in ways that we didn't necessarily feel were necessary at the time. But again, if that is something that's important to the board, we can do so.
Thank you.
Supervisor Zorro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got some questions here for Randy. The first one is, and after these questions, I have some comments as well. How many households and businesses will be served by the fiber within the 1,200 feet? Was it by chance 3,022?
So I gave you some responses, and I don't have them right here, but what?
Approximately 3,022 households.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, 3,022 homes and businesses.
And the take-up rate on that was estimated to be 50%, correct?
For Bug Tussle's analysis of their financials, they assumed 50%, and they indicated that more often they get to 85%.
So if it's about 50%, about half of that, it's about 1,500 households and businesses in Rock County, approximately, correct?
That's right along the fiber route, correct?
Okay. Why was, and then maybe this is a better question for Bug Tussle, but why was Bug Tussle's parent company, Hilbert Communications, delinquent in their annual report and payment to the state of Wisconsin to remain in good standing in July of 2019?
I was not with Bug Tussle or Hilbert Communications at that point in time, but you're referring to the $75 DFI fee?
I think it could be 75, maybe 100, but I mean, we're talking about millions of dollars here, and if you can't pay $75, I mean, that's a concern of mine. Why were you guys delinquent?
I wouldn't necessarily characterize it as a couldn't but neglected to. And obviously, it's not an appropriate thing. We shouldn't be delinquent in payment of any of our bills, no matter how small that they come across, but it was more likely than not something that was just overlooked.
And if Bug Tussle does not make their bond payments, and how much are my constituents and the constituents in other districts going to be taxed to pay for that?
I'm not familiar with the taxation policies or your process for handling in the event the monies are passed, or in the event the payments are transferred to the county. The county decision on how that situation is addressed varies very significantly by county. Some of them have plans to cash flow it out of their general fund. Others would issue bonds of their own on an annual basis to fund the debt service reserve fund. I can't speak to what Rock County's plan would be.
In the event that there is a default, and for whatever reason, there's just not enough proceeds, revenue, to pay these bonds, before our taxpayers are hit with a tax increase, is the owner of the company, Stephen Schneider, willing to personally guarantee the debt so that we could take his assets first before it goes to my constituents?
No. The totality of our parent corporation, Hilbert Communications, is the primary guarantor on everything, but our shareholders are not personally liable for this debt.
So if the shareholders and owner of the company is not confident enough, willing to personally guarantee this debt, should our taxpayers be just more confident than the owners of the company?
I wouldn't characterize it as a confidence situation, but as a prudent business decision, up to them as individuals. But the benefit is in a very different position for our individual shareholders as it is for the residents of Rock County. But there's some level of risk in this program. There's some level of risk that's being passed on to the county because that's how this project is structured. The county has a good credit rating. The county has the ability to share that good credit rating with us so we can get long-term bonds on a very low interest rate, so we're able to afford to build out a broadband network in areas where other people have neglected because the population density doesn't support the cost. We're a privately held company so that we have the ability to take out 30-year debt. We don't have to adhere to quarterly financial statements like other publicly traded companies do. This is a very unique program. It's going to be a little bit different with a lot of other companies that you talk to, especially the publicly traded variety, but that's just kind of how this particular program sorted itself out.
That answers my questions, but I do have some comments. And the internet changes every 10 years. So dial-up internet went mainstream between 1990 and 1995. Fast forward 10 more years. That's when broadband went mainstream between 2000 and 2005. 10 more years, 4G cellular data went mainstream between 2010 and 2015. It's now another 10 years. And the internet's changing again. We now have 5G and Starlink being released. And these new technologies are actually superior to the fiber optic cables because they transfer data at faster speeds. Therefore, they have the potential to make broadband cables obsolete in the very near future, which could foreseeably result in an unplanned financial demise of a company like Bug Tussle, which would then put Rock County taxpayers on the hook to pay taxes for an obsolete service nobody uses anymore. This would be a brand new tax increase on top of the tax increase the board already voted with the new jail. The nature of American capitalism is that if there's a way for somebody to make money doing something, they will figure out a way to do it. Not a single person in the world has ever figured out how to profitably offer broadband internet in rural Rock County. The only way this could be financially feasible is if $8 million of government grant funds plus another $5 million of loan debt guarantee that attaches to the backs of my constituents and their tax bills if the company defaults is the only way a project like this could work. Think about it. It's corporate welfare and socialism. But it's not even the good kind of socialism where we take from the rich and give to the poor. This is a deal where we take from the poorest people of Rock County and give it to the wealthiest people of Rock County. And by that I mean a lot of the lowest home values in Rock County and the lowest incomes are in the inner cities of Beloit and Janesville, where we already have broadband, and we're comparing that to where we have higher incomes, larger properties, higher tax assessments in more rural Rock County. So I can see how this project could be beneficial to a small minority of Rock County residents, but that doesn't include my constituents living in my district. I think it's important to point out that this project is meant to get broadband internet to rural Rock County residents, and while it get it to some rural residents, it won't get it to all rural residents. It only reaches people that live within 1,200 feet of the fiber. And there's nothing wrong with voting on projects that help everybody in the county, or even voting on projects that help just small geographic areas of the county, provided that the cost to do so is reasonable. However, this is another resolution that spends huge amounts of money in Rock County while my constituents in Beloit continue to be ignored. It's important to me to make sure that Beloit is getting its fair share of county resources, and I think this resolution falls short of that. Using $6 million of ARPA money is the second largest project of using ARPA funds, and it should benefit the county as a whole, not just a small minority of residents. I realize and understand that all of us have a duty to vote on issues that benefit Rock County as a whole, but as supervisors, we first have a fiduciary responsibility to the constituents in our respective districts. This resolution is fundamentally different than the one the board originally approved when $6 million of ARPA funds were set aside. At that time, the board was told those funds would be repaid. We now know that isn't going to happen. I want to mention 18 companies from 1994 to 2022. James Patrick Corporation, administratively dissolved April 5th, 1994. Everly House Country Hotel, Inc., administratively dissolved May 16th, 1996. Enigma Data, LLC, dissolved September 26, 2007. Bell & Valet, LLC, administratively dissolved December 13th, 2011. BTW Investment, LLC, administratively dissolved December 13th, 2011. Mobile Lifestyles and Phones, administratively dissolved December 13th, 2011. Salon Moxie III, LLC, administratively dissolved March 13th, 2012. Dakota Wireless Group, administratively dissolved June 11th, 2013. Renegade Billing Company, LLC, dissolved June 14th, 2013. Node 2 Network, LLC, dissolved June 14th, 2013. Legal Pad Marketing, LLC, administratively dissolved May 7th, 2014. Knock Knock LLC, dissolved March 16th, 2015. Iowa Integra Consortium, LLC, dissolved March 16th, 2015. Just Cake Investments, LLC, dissolved May 1st, 2015. Badger Huts, LLC, dissolved July 21st, 2015. Integra LLC, administratively dissolved March 14th, 2020. Kirscher Building, LLC, administratively dissolved December 14th, 2021. Z-Bell Development, LLC, administratively dissolved March 16th, 2022. I suggest you look up the name of the owner of these companies and see if they have anything in common with Bug Tussle. It's important to point out that Bug Tussle has a 1.5 star average rating from customers with the Better Business Bureau. In 2012, the Wisconsin legislature budget passed Act 20, which deals with local control or home rule with respect to cell tower location decisions, and they've removed that from the local units of government. This means that Bug Tussle can build towers in places where our local residents do not want, and the county and local units of government will be powerless to stop them. This means if you happen to be a homeowner near one of these towers, your property value is going to drop 20%. This means we need to ask local residents their thoughts before we approve placing towers next to their property, because they're likely going to be very upset, like what happened when Bug Tussle did the same thing in Richland County, Vernon County, and Crawford County. Additionally, there's some comments here from Bug Tussle employees found on Indeed.com. Upper management doesn't care about employees. Their services are unreasonably priced and sneaky to the people buying them. Their marker 2 Mbps speeds, as they market these speeds as high speed that won't even run Netflix. This company is on the verge of shutting down. Another employee posted, "Too many assumptions are made without checking facts or asking questions. Their words do not match their actions." Another employee posted, "Their services are slow and the customers are always upset." Yet another employee posted, "Promises were broken, work equipment is old and slow, and it hasn't lived up to what was promised in the interview." For the reasons I've shared with you today, I cannot in good faith support this resolution at this time. However, I'm willing to reevaluate this proposal in the future after Starlink becomes available in Rock County next year, which, if it works effectively, could cause Bug Tussle to default on their payments and create a new tax on residents to pay for a technology that's already obsolete. So for that reason, I move to table this resolution until after we do a full formal credit analysis of the company to determine their ability to repay these bonds, and also no sooner than the second county board meeting in December of 2023.
I'll second that.
So there's been a motion and a second to table. I'm sorry, when did you say, did you have a specific date, or did you just?
Yes, I said the second meeting of December 2023. The reason for that is because that's when Starlink will be online, and that also gives us enough time to use these ARPA funds before 2024 if we choose to do so.
You said the second meeting in December?
The second meeting in December of 2023.
There is no second.
We usually only have one
Say
meeting in December.
we only have one meeting.
Make it the first meeting then.
Instead of the third meeting.
And just refresh, I guess, if we're gonna table and bring it back, what information are we looking? Because I don't want to table something, bring it back, and are we asking staff to get additional information? What is the direction that we're giving the staff? Are we just going to table it just for the sake of tabling it, and we still bring it back later with where we are now?
We want at minimum, a full formal credit analysis of the company to determine their ability to repay the bonds.
Okay. So there is a motion and a second to table this. Any discussion on that motion? Supervisor Crary.
Thank you, Board Chair. With all due respect, my father lives in Tucson, Arizona, and he pays for Starlink. It's $129 a month. So to table this until Starlink in particular is online and available in Wisconsin, when part of the reason for doing so is that it is the most vulnerable and some of the lower income population that would be needing to take advantage of that. I find that to be not on par. Also, if this is an issue currently with ARPA dollars available, there will hopefully not be a time that we have the advantage of ARPA dollars to be using, that we wouldn't have to pull money out of our county reserves and further tax our constituents. So I think that also has to be taken into consideration, that there may not be another time that we would have these funds available. There also may not be another time that we would have governmental agencies' assistance in helping the people of Rock County have access to broadband or to fiber network. I live in Beloit and just recently was able to have internet speed fast enough to be able to go on Zoom when I was appointed as a county board supervisor. So this is not just a rural issue. This is an issue that is all across the county. And with that, I defer to the next supervisor.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Herman?
I don't think it's a question for me whether or not we need broadband in rural counties. I used to live in the country as a single mom, and so I do know that it is something we need to look at. However, like I said, I had to research this on my own, and the reviews of this company is what bothers me, their ability to repay. Again, this does not affect my constituents. They already have stuff in place. So again, I would be putting their tax dollars at risk for a company that I don't trust at this point. I think there does need to be a full audit. This is a large amount of money. And for us not to audit a company is, I mean, if this company goes to a bank and the bank goes, okay, well, let's see, you make 11 million and you want 240 million, I like your credit, or I don't like your credit, or I'll give you the money. But now, instead, we're using our credit. And I just, that or get the records from Fond du Lac. I mean, there needs to be a better accountability for that financial stability of the company. I also don't like the 30-year payback. It's not in our norm, and there's no guarantees the company's going to be around for 30 years. So,
Chair, a point of order. The issue on the table is the postponement or tabling of the issue.
Correct. You're correct. So I think right now what we need to do is if you have any comments, we need to relate them to the tabling of and it's okay with tabling of the ordinance or the resolution that we're looking at now. We need to stick to that. I don't want to venture off too far. I gave some leeway, and I understand that this is a very tough decision, and we want to make sure that we get all of our thoughts out there to help us make a good, sound decision. So I think, yeah, that's important, but right now I have to kind of pull back and say the motion on the table right now is to table this until the December meeting. So I want to make sure that our comments are limited to that, so I thank you. Supervisor Stevens?
Yes, in the desire to postpone this and wrapping the postponement into another, if I heard this correctly, the postponement is being wrapped into two issues. One of that is another service provider that we're going to postpone this because we're waiting for another service of some sort to go online, or is that what I heard correctly?
What I'm hearing, and I'll look to Lisa and Corp Counsel, that we're tabling this for some additional information from staff as it relates to financial information about the company and a couple other things that we're looking at staff. I don't think we're tying in the fact of considering another company.
So what was the Starlight situation? Can somebody did I mishear that or
So I think the operative piece of the motion that's the most important and the most salient for determining when this comes back is no sooner than the meeting in December 2023, right? It doesn't really matter what else happens. It can't come back any sooner than that. My understanding, and Supervisor Zoril is certainly more than welcome to correct that, is that the reason why he picked that date is that's the anticipated timeframe for Starlink to come online. He also indicated that he wanted the county to perform a full financial audit of the books of Bug Tussle in between now and that time.
And so if I may, as a chair, then what I want to do if we're going to table it and bring it back to that first meeting in December. When we bring it back, I wanted to focus seriously on what we're discussing tonight, not bring it in and have another company in the loop at all.
Okay, that's my
I think if
concern.
we're gonna bring it back for discussion, we need to bring it back on the merits of what we're discussing this evening and not hold it. This is just my personal opinion that we don't need to hold it out for another company to come online, because I think the ad hoc committee did research and screen other companies as well.
Thank
And I
you.
look to
That is my
council for
concern.
that and make sure that that is okay, because I think it's unfair for us to hold this. I think if we want to look at another company, so to speak, and I'm not putting words in Supervisor Zorro's mouth, but if that's the case, to me, then it needs to go back to the ad hoc committee with this company being evaluated just like the other companies needed to be. That's just my understanding, hindsight understanding, but I think we need to be, if we're bringing it back, we need to deal with what we're dealing with this evening.
Thank you. And then then it doesn't need to come back. We don't have to wait until December. Why? Because it sounded like to me the reason why it was coming back in December was specifically for the Starlight issue. Or did I misunderstand that? Okay, so why is it coming back in December?
Gosh.
Maybe Supervisor Zorro can.
Supervisor Zorro.
I can clarify. There's 3 reasons why the December 2023 date is key. Number 1, it's before 2024, and we still have access to allocate the ARPA money. As soon as you're into 2024, it's my understanding it's too late. So that's the first reason. The second reason is to give us enough time to run a full credit analysis of the company to evaluate, what's the ability of the company to repay. That's the second reason. The third reason applies to Starlink. I'm not saying we're considering another vendor or anything. I'm saying that Starlink has stated publicly that they're coming to Rock County. Whether we like it or not, they're coming, and their projected time to come is sometime in 2023. When exactly in 2023, I don't know exactly, which is why I said December, because by then it should be up and running. And at that point, we can say, is this a good company or not a good company? Do we want to move forward with Bug Tussle or not? That's going to give us enough time to evaluate that decision.
Then, Mr. Chair, I don't believe we should be holding this off until December, because it sounds to me like this is being held off to December 2023 specifically for another company, is what it feels like to me.
And I'll yield to Corp Counsel with a question then. Is it my understanding that if another company wants to get in on this project, would it be advisable to send that to the original committee that was set up and evaluated the other companies that applied or listened or presented to the ad hoc committee on trying to get this service?
So I guess let me kind of unpack that a little bit. So I think first off, it's important to frame what we're having a discussion about in the context of what you're deciding, which is simply to postpone decision on this resolution or not. So whether another company could be involved in providing internet to rural Rock County or not may be a part of that decision, but it's not as if you're deciding whether to send it back or not send it back, or whether to do any of those things. You're deciding on this motion on and of itself, on its own merits. Are you going to delay the decision on the initial resolution to issue the bonding until December of 2023? And meaning we will not bring this resolution back until at least December of 2023. So my understanding again, and I'm using my own knowledge of what Starlink is, as well as kind of inferring from what Supervisor Zorro is saying about Starlink. Starlink has no interaction with the county in terms of participating in any project for delivery of broadband to the rural parts of Rock County. Starlink is I think a satellite-based telecommunications service that beams broadband service from space into geographic locations, and they've targeted a number of geographic locations across the country that apparently Rock County may be one. I have no idea personally whether that's true or not. I don't have any reason not to believe it. I can't vouch for it. And so what we're not really talking about whether Starlink can participate in some kind of initiative or spending of ARPA funds or bonding or any other kind of revenue generating or derived process that the county's participating in, that as Bug Tussle is talking about. I mean, this really is a private-public partnership with Bug Tussle. That is not what Starlink is. Starlink is simply just another ISP that has another version of technology that delivers internet service in another way.
Call the question. Second.
So there's a motion to call the question. Who made the motion?
He made it,
Sweeney?
and we both did it at the same time, a second.
Okay, so Sweeney made it. We'll go second with Stevens. So if we, so just for, we know, if we call the question, then this is going to end the discussion on this. And then the next thing that we would do after that is vote to table the, vote on the tabling, bringing it back in the in the first meeting in December. With the information that Supervisor Zorl has requested.
Mr. Chair, could you please read the?
Okay, give us 1 second and we'll read it back.
So right now, we're calling the question,
Correct.
so we have to vote on that first.
How many people are present? So just as a reminder for those of you who haven't done this before, in order to call the previous question basically is a motion to end debate. Debate is ended if it passes and you vote on the previous question, in this case, the motion to table. And in order for that, the previous question to be called, so in order to end debate, 2/3 of the members present need to vote in favor of that. So it's a 2/3 majority situation. We have 25 supervisors present tonight, and so that number
Yes, to call the question.
17 supervisors to vote in the affirmative in order to end debate on the motion to table.
So at this, so is okay, we have everybody's attention, please. We want to make sure we got an understanding. So is everybody clear what we're voting on? If we vote as, and 17 people vote in favor, then we're ending the discussion and we're moving to the motion to table. Want to make sure we're all clear. Okay, at this time, everyone please vote.
24 yes, 1 no, 4 absent.
Thank you. So now we move to the original motion that is on the floor, which is tabling, which is to table this until the first meeting in December
Of 2023.
of 2023, correct?
Mr. Chair.
2023.
Could you ask them to read the motion?
Lisa, can you read do you have the motion that we can read back?
So I have that we're tabling this resolution until the first meeting in December of 2023.
Point of order, Ms.
Okay, hold on. Okay, go ahead. Supervisor Zorro.
That's correct, but in addition to that, it's also to table until we have a full formal credit analysis. So in the event that that meeting comes December 2023 and we still don't have a full credit analysis, we're still in tabling it.
That's what I have as well.
Okay. So, and I think they just want to hear what that motion is, what they're voting on. So if you can get that motion.
The motion would be to table consideration of the resolution, which is the initial resolution on the bonding, until at least December of 2023, and until such time as we have performed a full analysis of the credit risk of Bug Tussle.
So that's, everyone understands the motion. And I don't think we can, because we ended debate on it, correct?
We can answer point of order questions about the motion, but we can't engage in debate about adoption of the motion at all.
Supervisor Cullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I ask, I don't know the answer to this, can I ask Supervisor Zorl to amend his?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Bryan, did you have anything particular to the motion?
I had a question, but I don't think it would be in order.
Yeah, we can't. So everyone clear now on the motion. We're all set. Okay. Please vote.
Supervisor Pennycook?
Yeah.
Your switch isn't reading?
Where they're gonna go through Fond du Lac.
Do you have, did you leave it on, yes or no?
She has a point of order question, I believe. She just,
Okay, can everybody, before we start, let's everybody let's pull that back. We're gonna redo that vote, because I want to make sure that we're clear and everybody gets these point of order questions in, and I don't want to have a vote already registered and someone, so I want to just make sure we're clear. So a point of order question,
can you just say what you said again, please? Thank you.
Yes, so the motion is to postpone consideration of the initial resolution on the $8 million bond issuance until at least December 2023, and such time as the county has finalized a full analysis of the credit risk of bug tussle.
everybody got it?
Oh, he missed the last part, and we have to table it again.
No.
I thought you said
No, so you can think of it as two conditions that have to be met prior to the resolution coming back to this board. One, we have to get past November of 2023. We have to be in December of 2023, because we only have one meeting in December of 2023. And the county has to have a final report on the credit risk of bug tussle in its hands to present to the board. And then the resolution can be considered by the board.
We all clear? Please vote.
Six yes, 19 no, 4 absent.
Okay. So now, the vote to table failed, correct?
Correct.
So now we're back to the original motion that we started out with this evening, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I just want Supervisor Creary.
Can I ask a question? Correct. I mean, we're back to debate, right? I mean,
Correct.
I'm even a little.
Correct. Correct.
My head's befuddled now. Josh, can you give a rough estimate of what a full forensic accounting of bug tussles, creditworthiness, financials would cost?
I'm trying to remember, we've done this one time before when the county was considering a certain action, but that was several years ago. So I'm having trouble remembering, but I would guess it would be in the, if we're going to like contract with an accounting firm, for example, let's just several $1,000s, let's just say, somewhere in that range. There's probably others in the room who have a better sense of that than I do. So if anybody has any sense what that would cost, please feel free to volunteer that. But I would think it would be in that range somewhere.
You said several thousand?
Several $1,000s. I wouldn't think it would be, much more than, in the $10,000 range. But again, I would, there are others again who have expertise in that area. I would welcome their input as well.
I recall thank you for clarifying that. I recall a discussion that we had on a certain position that pays $1,200 a year that was being opposed. So, to pay $10,000 for a full forensic auditing and so on seems a little ridiculous to me. Thank you.
Supervisor Herman.
Yeah, he was comfortable with
Thank you, Chair. And I do see what you're saying, but it's 10,000 versus 8 million. So I will motion to table it until we get a full audit of this company.
I'll second that.
It's been motioned by Herman, second by
Zorl seconds.
Second. So there's a motion and a second to table this until we receive a full audit.
Call the question.
Call to vote? Okay. So everybody understands, where we're voting on now is to table this until we receive a full audit from Buck Tussle, correct?
So the motion that's been made, okay, we're gonna walk the chain here. So initially, the motion that was made is a motion to table until the county receives a forensic audit of the Bug Tussle financials for credit worthiness. That was first by Herman, second by Zorl. Then immediately after that, Supervisor Stevens made a motion to call the previous question that was seconded by Rashkin.
Correct.
So the current vote would be to end debate, which again needs to pass by 2/3.
Okay. So we're gonna vote again, voting in favor. This, if you vote, we're voting to end the debate. And then we would vote on the motion to table. Okay, everyone clear? Please vote.
Stay awake, Russ.
Yes, 24, 1 no, 4 absent.
So at this time, we will end debate, and at this time, we will vote on tabling this until we receive the full financial audit, as Corp Counsel just stated. All those in favor, so please vote at this time. I was not gonna. I would have been running out of here. If I had to finish that statement, I was.
Hey, I'm gonna need you to say that. No, seriously, I need you to say that one more time. No, seriously. What are we voting?
So, okay, all but the last part. I won't say the last part again. So, what we're doing now is voting to table this until we receive a financial audit from Buck Tussle. Plain and simple. Please vote at this time.
Yes, 12, no 13, absent 4.
So that failed as well. So now we're back to the original motion that we've been at. So at this time, we will go with Supervisor Woodman first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess because of all the concerns, I would move to table this to the next meeting, just so that we can go home and think about it. There was a lot to think about. I did find some things today that were concerning to me. And that, I guess that's where I'm at.
Is there a second to that motion? Second by Farrell.
Yes.
Now we will be voting to end the debate.
I didn't hear anyone call the previous question, so you can debate.
Okay, so
debate the motion.
So, all right. So, Raskin called to end debate. Okay, is there a second to that? Second by Herman. Okay, so now what we're voting on, again, for the third time, is to end the debate. Please vote.
Twenty-three yes, 1 no, 4 absent.
Okay,
Oh, I missed someone's vote. Supervisor Sweeney.
He voted to end the debate.
Voted to end, thank you very much.
So the debate is ended. So at this time now, we're voting to table this until the next meeting. Please vote.
Sure.
13 yes, 12 no, 4 absent.
What did I say it was?
Hey, so now we're back to the original motion. No.
No, it's fast.
Wait,
Oh,
hold
wait,
on.
yes, you're right. It's majority vote.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
sorry.
All right, so we're tabling this to the next meeting. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your voting. Next item, please.
Next item, number 12, adjournment.
Motion by Boswick, second by Creary. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned.
Thank you for your Clarification.
I ain't gonna take this home.